My name is Monica Ellery, and I'm 36 years old. Up until a few months ago, I would have told you I understood how marriage worked. You fight, you compromise, you build something together, even when it's hard. You don't just throw it away because you're bored. At least that's what I believed. I'd been with my husband Ethan for 8 years, married for 5. We met at a friend's barbecue, the kind with lukewarm beer, overcooked chicken, and too many people pretending they weren't scanning the crowd for someone interesting. He was behind the grill, of all places, making jokes about marinades and smoke like he was hosting a cooking show. I laughed. He handed me the least burnt skewer, and that was the beginning. We did the typical trajectory, dated, moved in together after a year, got married 2 years after that. Normal, steady, predictable. If our relationship was a graph, it would have been a straight, calm line. No wild spikes, no dramatic crashes. Except, sometime this past year, the line dropped. I just didn't realize how far. Our 5th anniversary was coming up in late September. Around June, Ethan started to change. He was there, but not really. His body sat on the couch, his mind was somewhere else. I'd ask what was wrong, and he'd shrug it off. Nothing. Work stuff, he'd say, eyes glued to his phone. Do you want to talk about it? There's nothing to talk about, Monica. You wouldn't get it. That one hurt more than I let on. You wouldn't get it. I told myself it was just a rough patch. Everyone goes through them, right? Long days at work, too many bills, not enough sleep. You ride it out. You plan a date night. You buy a bottle of wine. You keep trying. So I tried. I suggested weekends away. He said it wasn't a good time. I tried cooking his favorite meals. He picked at his food and scrolled through his notifications. I brought up counseling. He rolled his eyes and said, "We're not that bad." 2 weeks before our anniversary, he changed again. It was like someone had flipped a switch. He came home one evening, dropped his keys in the bowl by the door, and walked into the kitchen where I was loading the dishwasher. "So," he said, leaning against the counter like he was about to pitch a business idea, "I was thinking about our anniversary." My heart did that stupid hopeful flutter. "Yeah? What if we did something big this year? That restaurant downtown. You know, the fancy one with the ridiculous wine list." "Riverside?" I asked. "We've been there a couple of times." He nodded. "Yeah, let's go there. And I want my parents and my sister to come." I paused, one hand still on a plate. "For our anniversary?" He shrugged like it was obvious. "It's 5 years, Mon. That's a milestone. It would mean a lot to have them there. Make it about family, not just us." It felt odd. Anniversaries in my head were a two-person thing. Still, he sounded more enthusiastic than he had in months. I wanted to believe it was a good sign. I wanted to believe he was trying. "Okay," I said slowly, "if that's what you want." His smile didn't quite reach his eyes, but I grabbed onto it anyway. The night of our anniversary, I put on a dress he'd once told me was his favorite, a deep blue one that made my shoulders look good and my waist look smaller. I took extra time with my hair, with my makeup. I even bought a simple silver watch as a gift for him, something he'd pointed out in a shop window months ago. I told myself this was going to be a reset, a new chapter. The restaurant was glowing when I walked up, all warm light and polished glass. I checked my reflection in the door for half a second, just long enough to see the anxious determination in my own eyes, then stepped inside. I spotted them right away. Ethan, his parents, his sister, and her smug husband were already there at a corner table, drinks in hand, laughing about something I wasn't part of yet. I glanced at my phone. I wasn't late. If anything, I was 5 minutes early. "Hey," I said as I reached the table, forcing a smile. "Sorry if I kept you waiting. Traffic was stupid." Ethan looked up and gave me a smile that never made it past his mouth. "You're fine. We were just getting started." His mother stood up halfway, air-kissed the side of my face, and commented on how dressed up I was. His father raised his glass. "To family," he said. Everyone clinked their glasses. I joined in, a beat behind, already feeling that weird disconnect you get when you walk into a room where the conversation started without you in more ways than one. We ordered. There was small talk. Ethan's mother asked about my week, like she hadn't already heard sanitized versions from her son. His sister made a remark about the restaurant being a level up from the places we usually went. "Wow, Ethan," she said, looking around. "Didn't know you guys did places like this. So fancy." I bit my tongue. We'd eaten here 3 times before. She knew that. Appetizers came. The waiter poured more wine. The conversation floated around me, skipping across the surface of work, housing prices, and some drama involving Ethan's cousin I barely knew. I kept waiting for the moment where he'd turn to me, squeeze my hand under the table, make some dumb joke about surviving 5 years of marriage. Instead, midway through our starters, he reached down beside his chair and set a manila envelope on the table between us. The sound of it hitting the white tablecloth was soft, but it might as well have been a gunshot. I stared at it, then at him. "What's that?" "Open it," he said. Suddenly the air felt heavier. I became acutely aware that his family had gone quiet. His sister's eyes were bright, too bright, almost gleeful. His mother's lips were pressed into a line that looked suspiciously like anticipation. I picked up the envelope. My fingers didn't feel like they belonged to me. I slid a hand inside and pulled out a stack of papers. Legal papers. My name. His name. The word separation agreement staring up at me. I felt for a moment like the room tilted. The date at the top mocked me. 2 weeks earlier. Before he'd asked about the restaurant. Before he'd acted excited. Before he'd called this a family celebration. I swallowed. "What is this?" He didn't even flinch. "I think it's pretty clear." "You're serving me separation papers," I said slowly, "at our anniversary dinner." "I wanted to do it somewhere public," he replied. "Somewhere you wouldn't make a scene." His sister laughed. Actually laughed. "Oh my God," she said, not even trying to lower her voice. "You should see her face." The words on the page blurred for a second, then snapped back into focus. Division of assets. He wanted the apartment. The car we'd bought last year, but I'd financed. Half my savings. All while his father raised his glass again. "To new beginnings," he announced. They clinked their glasses, toasted, smiled. It was so surreal, so grotesque, that something inside me just snapped into place. No tears, no screaming, just a cold, clean line of clarity. "You've been planning this," I said quietly, looking at Ethan. "For a while." "Yeah," he said. No apology, no hesitation. "And you brought your family to watch." His mother leaned in. "We're here to support him. This is a big step." "A big step?" I repeated. "We're married." "Not for much longer," his sister murmured, smirking into her wine. Ethan sighed like I was inconveniencing him. "Look, Monica, I'm not happy. I haven't been happy for a long time. You're fine. You're stable, but I don't want fine anymore. I want more. More life. More excitement. More everything." His father lifted his glass again, to Ethan finally choosing himself. They laughed, they toasted, and I realized they thought this was funny. A show, a story they'd tell later. Remember when he dumped his boring, stable wife on their anniversary? I stared at the papers, at my neatly printed name, at the list of things he was trying to walk away with. Then I did something that clearly none of them expected. I picked up the pen lying next to my plate, and I signed every page, every line. No questions, no counter-arguments, no bargaining. When I was done, I stacked the papers neatly, set the pen on top, and looked at Ethan. He actually looked a little thrown for the first time all evening. "You're not going to fight this?" he asked. "No. Why not?" I leaned in, close enough that he could see how calm my eyes were. My voice stayed low, steady, eerily level. "Because you just ended the only stability you ever had." His jaw tightened, just a fraction. I stood up, left the small, wrapped watch box on the table next to his untouched drink. Smoothed my dress with hands that suddenly didn't shake anymore. "Enjoy your celebration," I said. Then I turned around and walked out of the restaurant while his family sat there, frozen for half a heartbeat, unsure if they should still be smiling. Outside, the night air hit me like a slap. The city lights blurred at the edges as I made my way to the car. I drove home in silence, my hands locked on the steering wheel, replaying the way they'd raised their glasses over the ruins of my marriage. When I walked into our apartment, my apartment, it already felt different, like the air had shifted, like the walls knew something I was still catching up to. I didn't turn on all the lights. I just stood in the living room, staring at the framed wedding photo above the couch, the two of us grinning at each other like we were untouchable. After a long minute, I walked over, lifted the frame off the nail, and set it face down on the dining table. Not angrily, not dramatically. Just done. The next morning, my eyes opened before my alarm. For a few seconds, I didn't remember why my chest felt heavy, why my throat was raw, why the apartment felt wrong. Then the memory slammed into me in a rush of white tablecloth, clinking glasses, and my name printed on legal paper. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint traffic outside and the hum of the fridge down the hall. 5 years of marriage, 8 years together, reduced to a stack of papers and a toast to new beginnings. Happy anniversary to us. By the time my alarm actually went off, I'd already made a decision. I got up, took a quick shower I barely felt, pulled on work clothes that didn't quite feel like they belonged to me anymore, and made coffee strong enough to strip paint. On my way to the kitchen, I passed the dining table. Every framed photo that had hung on our walls was there now, laid face down in a neat, accusing mosaic. Weddings, vacations, birthdays, holidays, all the proof people point to when they say, "But you look so happy." I couldn't look at them. Not yet. I checked my phone. A flood of notifications greeted me. A text from an unknown number that I didn't have to guess about. His sister, "Can't believe you just walked out like that. So dramatic." I blocked the number without replying. Another one, this time from his mother. "We expected better from you. Ethan deserved a proper conversation, not theatrics." I blocked that too. It was almost funny. They'd choreographed my humiliation in public, and somehow I was the one being scolded for theatrics. Then there was Ethan. "We need to talk about logistics." I stared at that message for a long moment, the word logistics making my skin crawl. My life wasn't a shipment to be rerouted. I typed slowly, carefully, feeling each word anchor something inside me. "Have your lawyer contact mine." 3 seconds later, my phone buzzed. Incoming call. Ethan. I declined it. Another call. Declined again. Another text. "You're being childish." My thumb hovered over the screen. I could feel the old reflexes kicking in, the urge to explain, to smooth things over, to make him see my side. I took a breath instead. I typed one final line. "I'll respond through my lawyer." Then I turned off my phone, set it face down on the counter, and finished my coffee in silence. At 9:30 that morning, I sat in a conference room that smelled like toner and coffee, across from a man in a navy suit with kind eyes and an expensive watch. His name was David. He was my lawyer. He slid the separation papers across the table toward him, adjusting his glasses. "Did you read these before you signed?" he asked. "No." My voice sounded small even to me. "I just signed." He looked at me for a beat, not unkindly, just assessing. "You had a reason?" I thought about Ethan's sister laughing, his father's raised glass, the eyes of strangers watching me like they'd stumbled onto free theater. "He did it in a crowded restaurant with his whole family," I said. "He said he wanted somewhere public so I wouldn't make a scene. Signing was the only power I had in that moment." David nodded, like that made sense. "Okay, then this is where we get your power back in a way that actually counts." He started flipping through the pages, methodically scanning each clause. His expression went flat in a way that somehow made me feel better. "Well," he said after a few minutes, "he, or whoever drafted this for him, is ambitious." I let out a humorless breath. "That's one word for it." "The apartment is in your name only?" he asked. "Yes, I had it before we got married. He moved in with me." "And the car?" "Financed in my name. He doesn't appear on the loan." "Your savings accounts are separate. No joint accounts?" "We have a joint checking account for bills and day-to-day stuff. My savings are separate." David nodded again. "Then he's requesting things he's not legally entitled to. Apartment, car, half your savings?" "No." The word felt like a warm blanket and a slap at the same time. "I already signed," I said quietly. "Does that mean I'm stuck?" "Not necessarily." He leaned back, folding his hands. "A sign-in proposal is not the final word. We respond with our own terms. We contest where it's overreaching. He doesn't get to just dictate reality because he brought a pen to dinner." I swallowed hard. "What can we do?" "We offer a fair separation," he said. "You keep what's legally yours. He takes what's his. Shared furniture can be divided, or he can buy you out if there's anything you actually want to keep. No apartment, no car, no savings." "You really think we can do that?" I asked. "I don't think," he said calmly. "I know. The law is on your side." For the first time since the restaurant, something inside me loosened. I felt my shoulders drop an inch. My lungs seemed to remember how to fill all the way. "Okay," I said, "then that's what I want." David gave a small nod and started dictating notes to his assistant outside the door, outlining terms, dates, deadlines. My life translated into bullet points and legal language. It should have felt cold. Instead, it felt like a spine. On my way back to the office, my phone vibrated as soon as I turned it on again. "Ethan, what the hell is this?" I didn't have to ask what he meant. David had moved fast. I typed back, "A fair separation." His reply came almost instantly. "You signed my papers." "And now I'm clarifying terms," I wrote. "You're not taking things you don't own." "We bought those things together." "No," I typed, my fingers steady. "I bought them. You lived in an apartment I rent. You drive a car I finance. My savings are my savings. Dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. You're being petty. I stared at the word for a second, the same way I'd stared at stable and fine at that dinner table. I'm being accurate, I replied. He didn't answer after that, not that day. The week that followed was strange. My days looked almost exactly the same from the outside. I went to work. I answered emails. I sat in meetings where people argued about timelines and budgets like any of it mattered. I nodded at the right moments, took notes, added action items. But everything felt slightly out of sync, like the world had shifted a half step to the left and no one else had noticed. In the evenings, I went home to an apartment that was suddenly too quiet and too full at the same time. His shoes were still by the door. His jacket still hung on the hook. His toothbrush still sat beside mine in the bathroom. I made dinner out of habit, enough for two, because that's what I'd been doing for years. Then I'd look at the extra plate and feel something twist inside me, this mix of grief and anger and ridiculous, hollow humor. I started putting the leftovers straight into containers as soon as I realized what I was doing, labeling them, freezing them. It was easier than thinking about how much of my life had been built around making sure someone else was fed, comfortable, taken care of. Friends started to hear things, because of course they did. Someone who knew someone who was related to someone had been at the restaurant that night. Rumors spread faster than facts ever could. My phone buzzed with messages. Are you okay? I heard something happened. Do you want to talk? I appreciated it. I really did. But the idea of telling the story out loud, of hearing myself say, he served me separation papers at our anniversary dinner while his father toasted to his new beginning, made my stomach flip. I responded politely. I'm fine. Just taking it one day at a time. Thanks for checking in. I didn't tell anyone about the part where I'd signed every page without reading it. That shame was mine alone. By the following Friday, David called. His lawyer responded, he said. They're pushing back on the terms. He's claiming he contributed significantly to the household and deserves compensation. I laughed. A sharp, humorless sound. He worked full-time, yes, but I covered rent, most utilities, the car, insurance, and a good chunk of groceries. He handled some bills, occasionally. That's what you told me, David said. We're holding our line. If they want to push back, they can push against the actual numbers. We've got bank statements, pay stubs, lease agreements. Facts are boring, but judges love them. What happens now? I asked. Now, he said, we wait, and you live your life. I hung up and sat there with the phone in my hand, the phrase echoing in my head. You live your life. What did that even mean now? That night, I went home and didn't immediately switch on the TV to fill the silence. I walked from room to room instead, really looking at the place. The couch we'd argued about buying. The coffee table he'd said was too small until he realized it made the room look bigger. The framed photos still stacked face down on the dining table. The apartment felt different, like it was inhaling after holding its breath for too long. Later, as I lay in bed in the dark, I realized something that startled me. For the first time in months, I wasn't bracing. I wasn't listening for the sound of his key in the lock, wondering what version of Ethan would walk through the door. I wasn't rehearsing conversations in my head, trying to find the right way to ask if he was okay, to check if I'd done something wrong, to avoid setting him off. There was a hollow space where my marriage had been, yes, a raw, aching emptiness. But the constant low-level anxiety that had lived under my ribs for the last year, it was gone. Loneliness, it turned out, was heavy. But it was still lighter than humiliation. I lay there staring at the faint pattern of light on the ceiling, tracing the shadows from the street below, and let that thought settle. I had no idea what came next. But for the first time in a long time, I knew where I ended, and someone else began. That had to count for something. The second bedroom had always been a sort of miscellaneous space. Half storage, half laundry overflow, half Ethan's stuff I didn't know what to do with. By the fourth week after the dinner, I'd started calling it what it really was. The exit room. Cardboard boxes lined the walls, neatly labeled in marker. Ethan. Clothes. Ethan. Books. Electronics. My C. Drawer junk. Every night after work, I'd pack a little more. Not angrily, not frantically, just steadily, like someone rearranging her life one object at a time. I'd pick up a sweater, fold it, place it in a box, pick up a paperback he'd bought but never read, tuck it alongside the others. The repetition was soothing in a way I didn't expect. It felt like peeling him out of the apartment thread by thread. 3 weeks had passed since the restaurant. My lawyer, David Fouye, handled everything now. Each update was the same. Ethan's side wanted more than he legally deserved. They insisted he'd contributed more than he actually had. They argued he was entitled to assets he never paid for. I let David handle it. I didn't need to justify myself anymore. Still, the house felt different. Quieter but not peaceful, like breathing after crying too hard. Some nights, I'd catch myself reaching for my phone to text Ethan something small, a joke, a meme, a random thought, out of habit, then remember. The reflex stung every time. One night, as I taped another box shut, my hand brushed an old shoebox on the top shelf of the closet. Inside were cards from years ago, scribbled notes in Ethan's handwriting, birthday messages, I love yous written in a younger version of his voice. I stared at them for a long time, waiting to feel something. Nothing. Just a quiet, steady confirmation that the man who wrote those words had not been the man who sat across from me at that restaurant. I put the lid back on the shoebox, placed it gently into a larger moving box, and taped it shut. It was almost 10 when someone knocked on my front door. It wasn't the polite kind of knock. It was the insistent kind. 3 sharp raps. A pause. 2 more. I froze. My stomach sank even before I looked through the peephole. Ethan. His shoulders were slumped, eyes shadowed, wearing an old hoodie I'd watched him pull from the dryer 100 times. His hair looked unwashed, his expression raw. For a moment, but only a moment, an old instinct tugged at me. The part of me that used to open the door at the first sign of trouble, ready to comfort, explain, fix. But that Monica had signed separation papers in a restaurant while strangers watched. I cracked the door open just enough to stand in the doorway and block his entry. What do you want? He swallowed, gaze flicking to the boxes stacked behind me like he'd been punched. Can I come in? No. Monica. He rubbed the back of his neck. Please. I just want to talk. You have a lawyer, I said calmly. Talk through him. His face tightened. 5 minutes. Just give me 5 minutes. Against my will, I noticed how tired he looked. Dark circles under his eyes, stubble that didn't suit him, the faint tremble in his jaw. But tired wasn't enough. Not anymore. I stepped outside, pulling the door shut behind me. The hallway light flickered above us, cold and fluorescent. Talk, I said. His eyes shifted away. I think I made a mistake. I didn't react. Not externally. Internally, something sank with a dull thud. Okay, I said simply. He blinked, surprised. That's it? Okay? What do you want me to say, Ethan? He dragged a hand across his face. I shouldn't have done it like that. At the restaurant, with everyone there. You're right, I said. You shouldn't have. His voice cracked. I was angry. I felt trapped. Everything was closing in on me, and I didn't know how to end things without... So you humiliated me instead. He winced. I'm sorry. It's too late for sorry. His eyes shot up to mine. What does that mean? It means you made your choice, I said quietly. You ended it. And you didn't just end it. You made it a spectacle. You invited witnesses. He took a step closer, desperation leaking into his posture. But what if I want back in? I stared at him, really looked at him. The tremble in his jaw, the way his hoodie hung like he'd lost weight, the faint sour smell of someone who hasn't been sleeping well. You don't get to do that, I said. Why not? His voice rose slightly, cracking at the edges. People make mistakes. Yes, I said, and people live with consequences. He flinched like I'd slapped him. We stood there in the hallway, silence stretching so thin I could hear the hum of the elevator down the hall. He let out a shaky breath. I don't have anywhere to go. Not my problem. I'm staying with my sister and she's driving me crazy, he said quickly. Her husband keeps making comments. My parents won't stop asking when I'm getting my own place. Get your own place then. I can't afford it, his voice broke. You know I can't. I felt a small, cold seed of anger bloom in my chest. You should have thought about that before serving me separation papers over scallops. His face twisted. I thought you'd give me the apartment. Why? I asked. Would I do that? Because. He hesitated, searching for an argument. Because we were together. Because you loved me. I held his gaze. I did love you, I said, past tense. That landed. Deep. He swayed slightly, like the words knocked something out of place. You really don't care anymore, he whispered. I care, I corrected. I care that you humiliated me. I care that you tried to take things you didn't earn. I care that you turned our marriage into entertainment. I paused. But do I care about you? No, not like that. He stared at me with something like disbelief. Something like grief. Something like ego cracking open. "You're cold." "I'm clear," I said. "There's a difference." He opened his mouth, closed it, then muttered something I didn't catch. Without another word, he turned, walking down the hallway toward the stairwell. His shoulders hunched, his steps uneven. Only when he disappeared did I feel my hands start to shake. Not from fear, from adrenaline. Closing the door behind me felt like sliding a final bolt into place. Inside, the apartment was dim, the boxes standing like silent witnesses. I sank onto the couch, not the one he'd insisted on, but the one I liked, the one I'd chosen. I let out a long, shaky breath. Then I did something small, petty, liberating. I pulled out my phone, ordered takeout from the greasiest place nearby, the one Ethan always complained gave him heartburn. When it arrived, I ate straight from the container, curled up on the couch in the clothes I'd worn all day, watching a show he hated. I went to bed at midnight without worrying whether the light would wake him. Small freedoms. Small, delicious freedoms. And for the first time in months, maybe years, my sleep wasn't restless. 6 weeks after the dinner, that awful, surreal performance they'd called a celebration, my life had settled into something resembling normal. Not happy, not healed, but functional. I went to work. I cooked simple meals. I slept through the night more often than not. The apartment had grown quieter in a way that didn't feel hostile anymore, more like a newly vacated room that was airing itself out after years of holding its breath. I still had the boxes stacked in the second bedroom. Ethan's things. His ghost, neatly compartmentalized. Every so often, I'd walk past that room and pause in the doorway, looking at the labeled stacks. Feeling nothing. Feeling everything. It depended on the day. By then, negotiations between our lawyers had turned into a sort of slow-motion tug-of-war. His side pushed claims about contributions and shared lifestyle investments, all of which David dismantled with facts, receipts, and an utterly unimpressed expression. Ethan's desperation was becoming increasingly obvious. Then came Friday night. I was in the kitchen, seasoning salmon and swaying to some soft jazz, music I'd never played when Ethan lived here because he'd claimed it made him feel old. I lit a candle, poured myself a small glass of wine, and let the quiet settle around me like a warm blanket. That's when the knock came. Not frantic this time, not angry, but heavy. I felt it before I heard it. I wiped my hands on a towel, walked to the door, checked the peephole. Ethan. And he looked worse than he had 3 weeks earlier. Eyes red, skin pale, a sag in his posture like he'd been held together with tape and someone finally peeled a piece off. I opened the door halfway, blocking the inside with my body. "What?" His voice cracked immediately. "I need help." "What kind of help?" He swallowed, his throat bobbed. "Everything." I raised an eyebrow. "Everything is not a specific request, Ethan." His breath hitched. "I lost my job." I said nothing. He continued, words tumbling out. I missed too many days. I wasn't performing. My boss said I wasn't present. They let me go last week." "And your sister?" I asked, even though I already knew where this was going. "She kicked me out yesterday," he said, shame coloring his voice. "I couldn't pay her the rent she wanted, and her husband kept making comments. She said it was too much stress having me there." I exhaled slowly. "And your parents?" He shook his head. "They said I could stay for a few days, not long term. They want me to figure things out like an adult." My lips twitched. Not a smile, not sympathy, something colder. "And you came here," I said. "You're the only person I have left," he whispered. There it was. The truth he had tried so hard not to say. Not "I miss you," not "I regret leaving," not "I was wrong." Just "I have no one else to rely on." He took a shaky breath. "Monica, please, I'm begging you, just for a little while, just until I get back on my feet." My voice stayed steady. "Let me get this straight. You humiliated me in public, tried to take my apartment, my car, my savings, refused reasonable terms, sent your family after me like I was the villain of your story, and now you want me to rescue you." His eyes filled with something raw. I know how it sounds, but I'm desperate. That's still not my problem." He blinked, stunned by the coldness of my tone. He wasn't used to this version of me, the one who'd stopped cushioning the truth for him. "Where am I supposed to go?" he whispered. "I don't know," I said. "Figure it out like an adult." He stared at me like I'd just shoved him into traffic. "You're really going to leave me homeless?" "You left me humiliated," I said. "We're even." He sagged against the doorframe, the weight of his choices finally catching up to him. His breathing hitched, then broke, then he crumpled. Not physically, but emotionally. His shoulders shook. He started crying, full-on breakdown, right there in the hallway. His sobs echoed off the walls. Lights flicked on down the corridor. Neighbors peeked out of cracked doors. I stayed exactly where I was. "Ethan," I said evenly, "you need to leave." "I can't," he choked out. "If you don't leave, I will call the police." His head snapped up, eyes wide. "You wouldn't." I pulled out my phone and started dialing. He stumbled back, wiping at his face. Fine, I'll go." He turned down the hall, shoulders shaking, one hand pressed to the wall like he needed it to keep standing. When he reached the stairwell door, he didn't look back. Not once. I watched until he disappeared around the corner. Then I closed the door and leaned my back against it, letting the silence swallow the last echoes of his crying. For a moment, I just stood there, breathing slowly, letting my heart beat steady. Then I went back to the kitchen. The salmon was slightly overcooked, but I plated it anyway. I turned the jazz back on, poured myself another inch of wine. By the time I sat at the small dining table, the apartment felt peaceful again. Not untouched. His visit had left a residue, a tremor, but peaceful. I ate quietly, savoring the flavors, the quiet, the absence of emotional chaos. Later, I washed the dishes, lit another candle, and sat by the window with my drink, watching the city lights flicker like distant warnings or promises. I couldn't tell which. My phone stayed silent. No more knocking. No more crying. Just peace. It wasn't joy, not yet, but it was mine. The voicemail came 2 days later. Not from Ethan, from the last person on earth I expected or wanted to hear from. I was at my desk at work when the missed call notification popped up. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail because I'd learned the hard way that unknown rarely meant anything good. When my lunch break rolled around, I stepped outside into the crisp air, sat on a bench under a young maple tree, and finally listened. "Monica, it's Margaret, Ethan's mother." I froze. Her voice, usually so polished and clipped, sounded strained, tight, but not apologetic. Never that. "I'm calling because Ethan is in a really bad place," she continued. You must know that." I stared across the parking lot at a delivery truck unloading cases of bottled water, listening as her voice wavered, not with grief, but with indignation. "He's staying in a motel. He can barely afford food. He's lost so much weight. It's alarming." A pause. "You could help him." There it was. Not even couched in pretend sympathy. Not "he misses you." Not "he regrets what he did." Just, "You could fix this." I took the phone away from my ear, staring at it like the device had personally offended me. When I brought it back, her voice had sharpened. "Monica, I know things were unpleasant, but families should take care of each other. You have the means. He needs support right now." The anger hit me like a quiet, steady flame, not explosive, not uncontrolled, just clean. I waited until the voicemail ended, then hit call back. She answered on the first ring. "Monica." Her tone was clipped, impatient, like she was a CEO waiting for an employee to explain an error. "I assume you listened." "I did," I said. My voice was calm in a way that made her stop mid-sentence. "And I'm going to make this very simple." A beat of silence. "Ethan," I said, "was family. Past tense. He ended that. You don't get to erase the way he did it." "He was overwhelmed," she shot back. "People make mistakes. You're being cruel." "No," I said, "I'm being consistent." Another silence, frosted and tight. "You've always been so cold," she said finally. "So calculating. No wonder Ethan felt trapped." I smiled, actually smiled, because the irony was so sharp it glittered. "The night he served me separation papers," I said, "you raised your glass while he toasted to new beginnings. You laughed when your daughter mocked me. You all sat there watching me unravel like it was entertainment. And now you want me to be the bigger person?" "That's different," she snapped. "It's not," I said softly. "You made your bed, Margaret, and your son climbed into it right beside you." She inhaled sharply, offended. What kind of woman turns her back on her husband when he's suffering? "The kind of woman," I said, "who refuses to get walked over twice." Then I hung up. I sat on that bench for a long moment, the cold breeze threading through my hair, my pulse steady. For weeks I'd been waiting for my emotions to crash. Sadness, guilt, regret, anything. Instead, I felt aligned, like the truth had finally clicked into its final shape. When I got home that evening, David called. "Good news," he said. His lawyer reached out. "They want to settle quickly. No more arguing about assets." I sank onto the couch. "What does he want now?" "Less," David said. "A lot less. It appears he's realized his position isn't as strong as they hoped." Translation. Ethan had run out of money, family patience, and bargaining leverage. David paused. "We could push for more favorable terms given the circumstances." I closed my eyes. For a flicker of a moment, the petty part of me, the hurt part, whispered, "Take everything. Make him feel it." But that wasn't me anymore. "No," I said quietly. "Give him the original offer. Clean split. I keep what's mine. He takes what's his." "You're sure?" David asked. "Most people in your position would—" "I'm not most people," I said. "I just want it done." He didn't argue. 4 days later, the papers were finalized. My divorce decree arrived in a flat, brown envelope that I opened at my dining table, the same place I'd laid the framed photos face down weeks earlier. I read the single page that made everything official. My hands didn't shake. I didn't cry. I didn't feel relief or sadness or victory, just quiet, weightless and absolute. Afterward, I put the paper in a drawer, grabbed a paint roller, and started on the living room wall. The color was soft sage green, one I'd always wanted, one Ethan said made a room feel too cottagecore and unserious. The first stroke of color across the wall was like taking a full breath after months of shallow ones. By the time the sun went down, the room looked like a different place entirely. Mine. A week later, I made a second change. I dragged the old couch, the one Ethan had insisted on, down to the curb. Bought a new one that felt like me. Soft gray, clean lines, deeper cushions, quiet elegance. Piece by piece, the apartment was beginning to look like a home I could live in without remembering what it used to be. My favorite moment came 3 nights later. I set the last box of Ethan's things by the door for him or his lawyer to collect, wiped my hands on my jeans, and turned on the lamp in the corner. The room glowed warm, quiet. Sage green walls, a new couch, a small candle flickering on the coffee table. The last remnant of him sat in a cardboard box by the door, waiting to be carried away. For the first time since June, I felt something close to peace unfurl gently inside my chest. It wasn't happiness. Not yet, but it was a beginning. Stop, Ben, Danoy. Continue ChatGPT, Danoy. 3 months after the anniversary dinner, the night that had cracked my life open like a dropped glass, I was standing in line at my favorite coffee shop waiting for my usual order when I heard a voice behind me say my name. Tentative, too familiar. "Monica?" I turned. Ethan's sister, Kara, stood there holding a reusable cup and looking smaller. The smugness she wore like perfume was gone. Her face had thinned, her posture folded inward a little. Even her clothes, normally loud and curated, looked tired. I didn't smile, I didn't frown. "Hi," I said, neutral. She cleared her throat. Do you have a minute?" "Not really," I said, stepping forward as the line moved. "It's about Ethan." I stopped walking. Of course it was. I turned just enough to face her. "What about him?" Her eyes darted around, checking who might overhear. "He's not doing well. I thought you should know." I raised an eyebrow. "Why would I need to know that?" "Because you were married," she said, like the word carried moral weight she had personally never believed in. "Because you spent 8 years together." "And then he ended it publicly," I said, "with you laughing at the table." She didn't flinch exactly, but her cheeks flushed. I know what we did was wrong." I waited. Silence can be more effective than words. Kara took a breath. "It was his idea to do it at the restaurant. The rest of us, Mom, Dad, me, we went along with it because we thought it was better if he had support. And maybe because we didn't really think about how it would feel for you." "You didn't think," I repeated. She flinched this time. "It was awful, and I'm sorry, truly." The apology felt like tossing a cup of water at a burning house after moving in next door to watch the flames. Still, it was more than I expected. She continued, voice softer. "He's living with our parents now. He lost his job. He's working part-time at a retail store for barely above minimum wage. He can't keep up with his bills. He barely talks. He cries at night." She hesitated. "He's not the same." I nodded once. Actions have consequences. "You really don't care?" she asked quietly, almost in disbelief. "I cared for 8 years," I said. "Built a life with him, tried counseling, tried talking, tried compromising. He threw all of that away for spectacle." Kara swallowed. "He wants to apologize, to explain." "I don't want to hear it." She blinked. "You're not even curious why he did it?" "No. How can you just shut it off?" I met her eyes. "Because he showed me exactly who he was, and I believe people when they do that." Her mouth opened, then closed. She seemed genuinely at a loss. My name was called at the counter. My latte was ready. I stepped past her, picked it up, and turned back long enough to say, "I hope he figures out his life, but that's not my responsibility anymore." I walked out, leaving Kara standing in line holding her empty cup like she didn't know what to do with it anymore. That evening, as I chopped vegetables for dinner, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Ethan. Please just give me 5 minutes. I need to explain." I stared at the message for a moment. No anger, no heartbreak, just a soft, tired disbelief that he still thought I owed him something. I deleted the message, blocked the number. Then I went back to slicing zucchini, letting the rhythmic sound fill the kitchen. People asked me, co-workers, distant relatives, acquaintances who'd heard vague rumors, if I ever learned why he did it. No. And more importantly, I don't care. Whatever the reason was, another woman, a crisis, boredom, resentment, it didn't justify choosing cruelty. People asked if we tried counseling. We did, 8 months before the dinner. Ethan stopped going after 3 sessions, said it was pointless, said we weren't the problem. I kept going for 2 more months alone until my therapist gently asked me whether I wanted to repair my marriage or whether I wanted to be the only person willing to show up for it. People asked if his family ever apologized. No, not once. Even Kara's apology in the coffee shop wasn't for the cruelty, just for the inconvenience of hindsight. But the question people asked most often, the one whispered like a confession, was, "Do you feel bad for him, for how things turned out?" And I always answered honestly, no. When he humiliated me in public, I suffered alone. When he mocked my stability, I carried the weight. When he tried to take what wasn't his, I fought quietly, legally, without hurting him back. He didn't fall apart because I left. He fell apart because for the first time in his life, he was standing on his own. Some people mistake stability for boredom until they lose it. Some mistake reliability for weakness until they're forced to rely on themselves. Some think cruelty is a shortcut to freedom until the bill arrives. Ethan was one of those people. 3 months after the dinner, my life looked different. Quieter. Softer. I went back to the gym, started running again, lost the weight I'd gained during the year we'd slowly unraveled. I bought clothes that made me feel like myself again, not the version of me that tried to fit into his aesthetic. I took a solo trip out west, something I'd always dreamed of, but Ethan had dismissed as too boring and too much walking. I hiked canyons, sat under stars, ate diner pancakes at 2 a.m. because no one was there to tell me they were empty calories. I remembered who I was before trying to shrink myself for someone who didn't understand how rare stability actually is. I'm not dating yet, not avoiding it, just not rushing. For the first time in years, I feel present in my own skin, full, awake. If people want to call me cold for that, fine. I'd rather be cold than set myself on fire to warm someone who'd toast to my downfall. When I think about that night at the restaurant now, I don't replay the humiliation. I replay the moment I stood up. The moment I walked out with my dignity intact while 4 pairs of eyes blinked in confusion, unsure how the script had changed. That was the beginning. The end was just the paperwork. I'm 36 years old. I have my own place, my own peace, my own life again.